Everybody? Yes, Tom.
Great presentation. And I'm thinking with all the bad news we get each day on television and the newspapers, this is so positive, and we all look forward to this. My question is, how aware and supportive are the Up Creek cities with respect to this very ambitious and environmentally sound plan? Because their support is going to be extremely important in terms of what comes down the creek.
Sure. Is that for me? Maybe that's...
They were all invited to this meeting.
Well, I don't know that anybody has... I'm not sure we have an answer to that question yet, but certainly that's part of our effort, is to engage the stakeholders in the watershed, the inland cities, not just at the political level, but at the grassrootsy level. We've been working on that for the last 2 years. And I will say, nobody's saying no. Nobody's pushing back hard. It's just a matter of getting their attention. But I do think that what you heard tonight from Lisa Bartlett and also from Pat Bates, that's very positive to us, because they're speaking to a higher level. And we are addressing the watershed as a whole. We've done that through the WQIP process, the process that manages stormwater. We've been very successful to get the Regional Water Quality Control Board to recognize the importance of a restored estuary at end of pipe for the Aliso Creek watershed. So when I opened the meeting and I said, we are now the Friends of the Aliso Creek Estuary, I probably should have said of the Aliso Creek watershed, because that's what it will take. We're hoping for true watershed management, which would mean that everything that happens in this watershed, whether it's the project by the Corps of Engineers, our project, or managing the storm runoff, should be done in a comprehensive, integrated way. And I think that's part of the future for Orange County, and I think our watershed could be on the cutting edge of that. Yes?
I was just wondering how similar this might be to the Back Bay in Newport.
It is similar in that it would be estuarine habitat. The difference is, there are differences as well. I mean, the similarities would include the types of vegetation. So vegetated marsh habitat would be common. Some of the species that could use the site would also be common with the Back Bay habitat. I think part of the experience could be similar, though at a different setting and different scale. I think the key difference is that this is a system that would not be fully tidal, as Newport Back Bay has a full tidal connection to the ocean, whereas this estuary is unique in its scale, size, and that it naturally closes at the ocean. And so it is unique from that perspective.
Hi, we had the opportunity to live at Treasure Island Mobile Home Park for 10 years. We observed excavation of the entire sand output along the beach there to rock bottom, and the return of the sand in the next round of waves and season to build it back up. And I'm a little confused about steelhead trout, which need an ocean habitat to make it into the inland waters. If you're going to put a berm up, one of the questions is, how do you keep the berm up when the waves will excavate it and take it away? And then secondly, how do the steelhead trout get in if you've got a berm that blocks their way?
Sure. So during the summer, the waves actually build up the sand berm by pushing the sand up. Of course, during winter storms, the beach can erode as well. And due to precipitation and rainfall runoff within the watershed, high flows coming down the creek can scour out the mouth and open it up. So there really is this two modes to the system, where dry, sunny weather, the estuary is closed, and then in wet weather, it opens up. And that really is the time when the steelhead are adapted to run upstream, is when the storm events naturally open up the creek. They can sense the fresh water coming out of the watershed and follow it upstream.
So you do plan for an open-closed system?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, and I guess to add to, so we're not proposing to actively build up the berm at the mouth. The intent of the restoration is to allow the natural coastal processes to build it to what it wants to be naturally.
And I think one other important thing, and one of the things we've learned about the southern steelhead over the last more recent times, is these closed systems are actually quite important for this subspecies, because the juveniles will oftentimes live in the closed estuaries for a period of time and grow and sort of get bigger and fatter, living in those closed systems, and eventually they out-migrate to the ocean. And the belief is they're more successful when they've had that opportunity for that additional growth period in these closed systems. And so we've learned, more recently that, unlike a lot of steelhead species where they just are primarily focused on rearing in the upper watersheds, these little closed lagoons are really quite important for those populations. And so that's an important element.
Here we go, Peter. Nope. Okay.
I think it answered my question.
I'm very excited about this project. I live right on the creek, and I can see my house in your picture. What I wanted to know, though, was the opening of the berm. When I often see people digging it out, and it's awful being a community policeman. But when I've been at a couple of other meetings, and the city said call this number if they're doing it, and they'll send someone down. What is the right thing to do? Because I do often see it happening, and I'd like, I go down there with my dog and say something, but I sort of feel like a complaining neighbor in a way. So it would be good to have a little bit of backup as to know what to say, what to do, and should one say something, and going forward.
Yeah. Where's Beanon? He knows the answer to this. Michael's gone. Well, so I do think that the proper response when the lifeguards are on duty is to talk to them, because they're the first responders. There probably is a number that we would call when they're not there, but I've noticed that what happens is that at 5:05 when the lifeguards are gone is exactly when the kids show up.
Well, it's actually early in the morning before they show.
Yes.
Yeah, it's normally around before the lifeguards come on duty.
Right, and this is one of the issues that the county staff, the Parks Department staff raised to us. They said, this is difficult to enforce because they get there at the crack of rosy finger dawn, and they're there. So this is why we're emphasizing the need for education to instill in their minds that this is a resource. We would like to see a proto phase to the project before we actually do any physical restoration, where we build some kind of a kiosk, something that says in a very vivid way, this is an estuary, and tells people what an estuary is, and it's a valued resource, and also tells them that it's the subject of a restoration project, so that they appreciate it. But if you look at the thing now, I mean, if I were a kid, I'd probably do the same thing, So it's just a matter of people understanding what it was and what it could be.
Could we maybe put a sign up that says, please don't?
Yes,
That would
absolutely.
be, at least
Yeah.
then there's something to point to something.
Because you're right, what there is now is there's a sign that says, this is nasty water, don't go in it.
Yeah.
People don't read that either, but, more signage would be an improvement. Yes, Lucy.
Yes, we do have a question, a sort of a communal question here.
There you go.
And I apologize for our lack of understanding. Our understanding is wetlands is created by tidal changes, and it sounds like you're closing off this tidal exchange. So how do you feed these wetlands
Right.
without this exchange of water?
Right. So wetlands really just need any type of water to be wet and be wetlands. So that it can include inland wetlands, it can include estuarine wetlands that are supported by a mix of inland water and ocean water. And coastal or tidal wetlands that are purely supported or primarily by tidal flows. So, you know, there are other projects where the restoration is supported by tidal inflow. This system, again, is unique in that it naturally, in that historic ecosystem and habitats in the photos, was supported by a closed system that was fed by water coming down the watershed that pools up in the estuary behind the closed berm and inundates the vegetated wetland and provides that water for the wetland habitat, as well as occasional pulses of ocean water from waves overtopping it and during rain storm events or coastal storm events that you know, can scour out the inlet and bring some salt water in. So it really is kind of a subset of coastal habitats that does have that ocean influence, but it's not a purely tidal supported ecosystem.
Will there be enough moisture coming from upstream to maintain it as a wetland?
Yes, we've again monitored the water levels, the flows, and we've modeled the water balance in the system, and reducing the inflow will make the average water level when it's closed drop slightly, but in restoring the wetland, we're going to be removing fill from the parking lot and bringing that down to the appropriate elevation where it'll be inundated and can support wetland vegetation. Bring a mic over here.
I don't need no mic.
Okay, great.
Is there a creek water and or ocean water quality benefit?
There is a creek water benefit or interaction in that the restoration plan includes addressing some of the pollutant loading from the watershed. So in the near term, diverting some of the creek water would actually remove some of the contaminants or pollutants that water carries. The estuary itself and the restored wetlands and vegetation have the capacity to also absorb some of the nutrients that are coming down from the watershed, either naturally or from urban runoff, and to uptake that. That's not the solution to the water quality problems in the watershed, but it is a benefit. It also provides a system that can shallowly inundated areas that can be more easily reoxygenated. So in that sense, it is improving water quality and would benefit water quality in the ocean as well.
There.
Hi, thanks for the great presentation. It was good to see. It was really illuminating to see your plan. I'm sure aesthetically it would be, should have come to fruition. It would be really great to see something that looks environmentally appealing and healthy rather than the sewer after dump that I grew up with. But my question specifically, I'm a skimboarder here from Laguna Beach, and I am specifically one of those kids who grew up waking up 5 in the morning to go down there and break the creek. And so I may be familiar with the mentality a little bit more than some of the other people in the room. And so my question is if the enforcement isn't what you had hoped, and say that the creek was broken throughout the dry season on a semi-regular or a regular basis, how would that affect the health of the wetland and what you're trying to accomplish here?
Right. I guess first I'd start is that we can see from the end of last summer when the enforcement was stepped up that it did largely stay closed. And though that could be expanded upon through education, we don't see occasional breaching of the estuary during the dry season as necessarily a fatal flaw to the system. The vegetation would likely be resilient to that type of change. So long as that we can keep it closed more of the time so that the water does pool up and support the vegetation. it could potentially affect some of the species that use the site. But again, what we're trying to do is restore wetland areas where even when the mouth opens, species have a place to go to for refuge. So tidewater goby, for example, if it were to reoccupy the site, would be in a better position in a restored system where it had small channels to go to in the wetlands or upstream areas when it is open, versus what it is today, which is just a channel that drains out when it opens.
In terms of water quality, I'm thinking of the newer developments that have really nice bioswales. Is there a possibility of an area before, from where the creek's coming downstream, an area of material that would make like a mini bioswale, so some of those contaminants could be pulled out before entering the rest of the system?
That is something that was considered for the restoration. So the idea of having a part of the site that would be essentially a treatment wetland for flow that coming down the creek before it enters the site. The issue is that we have a very small area, small estuary, and to treat the creek flow coming down the watershed would probably require most or all of the wetland site to be a treatment wetland rather than restored habitat to support species. In order for treatment wetlands to be effective over the long term, it requires management and occasionally, possibly excavating sediment accumulated pollutants from the wetlands. So they do provide habitat benefits, but they're not, native functioning ecosystems. So, we're looking to address the problem of the watershed pollutant input within the watershed, because that really is the long-term solution, rather than looking at the estuary as an opportunity to treat the watershed at the end of the pipe, per se.
It feels like we're getting ready to wrap, but let's do one more here.
Yeah, two questions. You mentioned permits in place of the safety to giving permits to erode or excavate the berm. I'm curious to know what scenario would a permit be given. I'm a little concerned because I've seen the houses threatened on that as the course of the runoff goes and has eroded property there. I'm wondering what that safety, because I don't see any other safety other than the preservation of property that's being threatened by the runoff. That is one question. The second is the watershed going up 35 miles and the invasive vegetation, which looks like bamboo, it's not bamboo, that in my lifetime has clogged 35 miles up that I've never, it's increased over my lifetime to where it looks like nothing it did 30 years ago. So the integrity of this project and the success of this project, to me, seems based on the eradication of that so evasive plant that I thought was slated to be removed in the last 3 or 4 years on a different project. So, two questions: the safety thing, why are they doing that by permit, and why they get a permit, and then the invasive bamboo-like plant that goes up 35 miles to that watershed.
Right. So I'll answer the first part of that question. On the second part, on the arundo, the invasive arundo plant, I can start that, and then I'll turn it over to Matt and or Eric, to our biologists, ecologists, to address that. So the county currently has a permit from the California Coastal Commission to breach the estuary under certain conditions within the permit for safety and other reasons. I can't speak for the county on kind of their objectives, but it is to manage, as I understand it, how the mouth migrates on the beach. And we actually see the opportunity with the restoration by taking the existing jetty on the south side and moving it farther to the south and expanding the mouth of the estuary, that it could make it so that the mouth it has more room to migrate and is not forced so much to the north to those properties. That's one potential benefit. The other part of the plan is, again, reduction of the flow into the estuary, which we expect to lower the water level in the estuary, so it wouldn't be pulling to the same level that it does now and pulling up onto the beach as much. And you can see in some of the historic photos how it's wider, but maybe a little farther back on the beach, and that's kind of the condition we're going for. On the Arundo, my understanding of Arundo control, and there's experience in this, with this in other systems, is that you basically need to start upstream and work downstream. So I don't know that we can solve that issue within just the estuary, but it is certainly, so it's potential management issue for the vegetation within the system, within the restored system. Anything to add on Arundo? No.
I mean, there's other systems, as Nick said, that strategies like Santa Ana River is a good example. It's not totally eradicated, but compared to what it looked like 20 years ago, that starting at the top and working down has been fairly successful. So it's definitely a solvable problem, but it does need sort of a watershed scale type of effort.
Okay, we have a couple more slides. This tells you how to keep in touch. Take a look at our website. In the future, we'll be posting updates as Nick's plan becomes finalized, draft and then final. You'll be able to see that. You'll also see this presentation on the website, the video, and the PowerPoints will be there. The cards that we passed out, those are comment cards that you can either leave with us or you can mail them in. You can email us at this address, and also you can attend the City Council on November 14. We're doing a slightly abbreviated presentation there, but it's kind of like more of the good stuff. Funding, of course, the Conservancy, the anonymous donor was great. South Laguna Civic donated funds that enable us to buy the canoe that you saw on some of the slides. Our good friend Charlotte Mazurek, and then a lot of people gave their time, in-kind support. There's a ton of people to thank. We could be here all night thanking them, including all of you. We have the videos queued up that we'd like to show you. They were outside. We don't want you to miss them because they're pretty great. So if we could play that right now, let's go ahead and look at that, and then I think we're going to wrap.